If you have been keeping up to date with Retroid over the last couple of weeks, you'll have seen that they have announced the Retroid Pocket Mini and the Retroid Pocket 5. It's been a slow rollout of updates, but we finally got pricing and specs for both devices, as well as a pre-order date. It hasn't even been a year since the Retroid Pocket 4 and Pro were released, but in the handheld world, it's no surprise to see companies wanting to roll out a new product when they can, unless you're Nintendo, who will make you wait 8 years. I expect before the year is out, we'll be able to have the Mini and the Retroid Pocket 5 in hand, so are they worth your hard-earned cash? Now that we know the specs, it would be fair to say that these devices are very much like Big Brother and Little Brother, and they're both small upgrades over the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. These are the first devices by Retroid to use a Snapdragon processor, and they're using the Snapdragon 865. Now, anyone who knows their specs will know that this is merely a hop instead of a jump from the Dimensity 1100 that was in the 4 Pro. But what this means is there's a bit more power, and we can also use the Qualcomm and Turnip drivers in certain emulators. It doesn't sound like much, but that driver support is going to make a big difference to things like Switch emulation. That alone doesn't sound like much of an upgrade, so why should these devices matter? Well, they both have AMOLED screens that reach 500 nits of brightness, which is something a lot of handheld owners appreciate. And given the lack of devices with OLED screens on the market, it does make them very unique in that regard. The Mini will have a 4x3 960p screen, and the Retroid Pocket 5 will have a 16x9 1080p screen. And both devices can output via DisplayPort to 1080p at 60Hz. What I personally find appealing is the 4x3 screen on the Mini. Having an OLED screen that is the perfect size for older consoles, I imagine will look absolutely gorgeous, so I'm really keen to see that. But that also means things like PlayStation Portable and Switch won't fit the screen properly. However, the Snapdragon 865 will be enough to make sure that GameCube and PlayStation 2 will play decently on it. Both of these devices will have 6GB of RAM and 128GB of internal storage. At the time of this video, there aren't any announcements of models with bigger storage, so you'll be relying on an SD card for that. And for anyone worrying about the 6GB of RAM, you can add an additional 4GB as virtual RAM using your internal storage to bump it up to 10GB. As for the battery, the Mini will have a 4000 mAh battery, whereas the Retroid Pocket 5 will have a 5000 mAh battery. I should note that the Retroid Pocket 4 also had a 5000 mAh battery, so you should expect similar battery life to that unless the AMOLED screen draws more than usual. They're also going to have a Wi-Fi 6, so they're going to be great for streaming too as well. So what about the design? This is the most obvious difference for Retroid, as they're a completely new design compared to their older devices, with rounded edges, bezel-less screens, and grips on the back for comfort. It's a wild rebrand that doesn't look like their existing products, but they're very modern and should be more comfortable to play. It seems a bit odd for a company called Retroid to have modern design aesthetics, but here we are. A very welcome addition for me is the front-facing speakers. I personally wasn't into the speakers coming out of the bottom of the 4, and if I'm honest, I also didn't like the texture of the shell either, so I'm looking forward to a device that seems like it's going to be smooth again. The system buttons are also placed very much like the Odin 2, which I like a lot as well. So these design choices I think are ones that make me love a device even more. They both also look to have an SD card slot and a 3.5mm jack for headphones too. What about color options? This one's a bit interesting for Retroid, as they've not gone for some of their usual colors. Maybe this is going with their new modern design aesthetic, but I think some longtime Retroid fans will be disappointed with some of them. The Mini has some classic black and retro options, but one I think is cool for Sega fans is the white Sega Saturn style, and Retroid have said that Sega Saturn is very playable, so that's a really cool thing. So if you like the idea of a dedicated Sega device, or just like that aesthetic, I think it's cool that they've done that, and it's not usually one seen on other devices. But there are no indigo, yellow, or even transparent options here. They also recently changed the black model from having color face buttons to white ones, which I'd rather they didn't. I quite like the color ones. So what about the Retroid Pocket 5? This one does have the indigo option, and this one looks very GameCube, which is very nice. It would have been nice to see the Mini have that, but unfortunately it's not to be. But the rest of the colours are two modern looking white and black options and a classic retro SNES style. They've also given DIY options to replace the back shell. I'm a bit confused about the colours here, and I wonder if they'll offer more options when they hit the store. Let's also look into the sizes as well. Based on the dimensions, the Retroid Pocket 5 looks to be only slightly larger than the 4 model, so if you consider the 4 pocketable, then I would also absolutely say the same about this one. What about the Mini? I took measurements against my Samsung Galaxy and it was about the same size, so the Mini will be like a smartphone that's a bit thicker. And what about the weights? The good news is that they're only slightly different to the other existing Retroid products. The Retroid Pocket 2S is 200 grams, where the Mini is 215 grams, and the Retroid Pocket 4 is 261 grams compared to the 5's 280 grams. So they're still very lightweight and good for longer play sessions. Lastly, let's talk about software. First, they've redesigned the launcher that comes with their system. It'll be interesting to see if it will stand against other popular launchers that people use. I still use Pegasus and probably always will because I love it, but a new well-functioning launcher is always welcome. Here's hoping for some customization options here. And what was a bit of a surprise was the announcement of Batocera and Linux support. I'm not sure if these personally interest me, but there'll be a bunch of people that will see this news as the reason to why they're buying these devices. So when can you pre-order the Retroid Pocket Mini or Retroid Pocket 5? Pre-orders start on the 9th of September at 6 PM Western Time, 9 PM Eastern Time, and if you're in the UK, that's 2 AM on September 10th. The retail price of the Retroid Pocket Mini will be $199 US, and the Retroid Pocket 5 will be $219 US. There's a small amount to save if you order in the first 24 hours as an early bird, with $10 off the Mini and $20 off the 5. After that, you can get pre-order prices. There was a lot to cover here, but finally all the important information is out, so I hope this video has helped you decide if Retroid's new devices are worth snapping up. It would be easy to have a long discussion on the performance and if they genuinely deserve being successors to the Retroid Pocket 4, but my opinion on a device is always that if it feels good, then it inspires you to play, and I personally like the designs of these new devices. I made some videos covering the Odin 2 Mini before its release, and I ended up cancelling my order before its release because I couldn't see myself feeling happy about the price for what I was getting since I was already an Odin 2 owner. What I really wanted the Odin 2 Mini to have was an OLED screen and be less than $300. And this is what we were getting here. I see the Retroid Pocket 5 as the Odin 2 Mini I would have wanted, even if it's lacking in power. But if you can grab it for $199 on September 9th, then I think it's an extremely good deal. And speaking of power, let's have some real talk here. So the Snapdragon 865 has been tested for emulation, and what people will say is that you can do most GameCube and PS2 bar a few intensive games, and you might not be able to set the resolution to 2.5x for PlayStation 2, for example, to hit a smooth 1080p. But these devices tend to be optimized for their chips with a high performance mode and cooling. So in actuality, yeah, what I am expecting of both the Mini and the 5 is pretty much great upscaled GameCube and PlayStation 2. In terms of emulation, what about Nintendo Switch and beyond? We won't be seeing Wii U emulation for some time, so what we have on Android currently are discontinued emulators for Switch with Yuzu and other forks that also died, such as Suyu and Sudachi. Sudachi allowed some titles from this year to work that wouldn't work in Yuzu, but I personally still use Yuzu on my Odin 2. So is there a future there? We've been getting new turnwhip drivers in the last couple of months that's actually fixed some games and given some even better frame rates. It's hard to say if newer drivers will improve things further, but that's all we have going for now. But a new emulator called Strato is in the works. It's not out yet and not quite as good as the existing ones on Android, but if there's a future for Switch emulation on Android, it's happening in Strato. I'm excited for the Retroid Pocket 5 and I think it has a really good price for what it's got. The Mini I wish was a little cheaper, but it's going to be extremely pocketable and the power it will have will be juicy. I just have no idea how well it will function as an Android device with a 4x3 screen. Should you get any of these if you already have a 4 or 4 Pro? Maybe not. You'd really just be getting a touch more power, possibly a more ergonomic design and an OLED screen. If that's a good enough upgrade to you, then it's time to leave the 4 behind. But had there been a stronger chip in this device, then we'd be looking at prices closer to the Odin 2, and it's very easy to recommend that device even if it's $300 for the base. That was a lot of information. What do you think of the Retroid Pocket Mini and Retroid Pocket 5? I loved the 3 Plus, but I wasn't massively into the 4, which was strange, but I feel like these new ones will pull me back. If you like this video, please give it a like, subscribe, as I think I'll be reviewing these devices, and I will see you all for those. See ya!